What's a random terrifying fact that will definitely keep me up tonight? Story 1. Sudden death syndrome is a sudden, unexpected death which may occur during sleep. Most sudden deaths are known as sudden arrhythmia death or sudden cardiac death syndrome, where a seemingly healthy individual experiences heart failure without any precedent or warning sign. Good night. Yay. This is similar to the broken heart syndrome, which is a malady that kills you a few nights after your SO dies. It's not as common these days, but in our grandparents' slash great grandparents' time, it was very common. There was no scientific explanation for why people died so suddenly after their soulmate. No raise in heartbeat or brain damage. Pretty weird, huh? Story 2. A flood basalt eruption is capable of wiping out an entire small to medium country under lakes of lava that stretch beyond the horizon in every direction, and leaving no trace that it ever existed or been populated, in a display that can go on for hundreds of thousands of years. They also take hundreds and thousands or millions of years to occur. There could be a flood basalt eruption working its way up through the planet right now, and we wouldn't know. Story 3. Gamma ray bursts can happen when a very massive star goes supernova. The inner core collapses into a black hole, while the outer layer explodes outward. In a few cataclysmic seconds, an energy output equaling what our sun will produce in its lifetime is poured into two narrow beams of raw destructive power emerging from the star's magnetic poles. If one of these went off close enough to us and hit our planet, all life would be sterilized in an instant. Our oceans would boil and we would all die. How much forewarning would we have? None. No warning. It travels at the speed of light. Sweet dreams. Edit. Some people seem to think that we would have time to prepare. The problem is information cannot travel faster than the speed of light, and the gamma rays are traveling at the speed of light. You literally cannot see the gamma rays coming ahead of time. If you see them, they are hitting you. You could conceivably monitor the state of the star and make a guess when it's going to go supernova. But when you actually observe the supernova, that means all that light has already traveled to us. Story 4. At some point in the 1970s, the USSR built a system called Perimeter, nicknamed Death Hand. This system was built to work as a failsafe in the event of a nuclear strike. The perimeter would automatically launch multiple ICBM missiles without the need for input from a human. There are conflicting reports on targets, but it was either enemy cities, New York, Washington, etc., or the Earth's atmosphere, rendering life on Earth impossible. Now, with the fall of the USSR, you would assume they dismantled such a system. Nope, it's still running at this moment, right now. A computer from the 70s is all that stands in the way of eliminating all life on Earth. One wrong input, and that all she wrote, it was designed to be unstoppable once triggered. Sleep tight. Story 5. Your DNA is undergoing a constant repair process for the damage caused by toxins, gamma rays, free radicals, INCL, the very oxygen you need to survive. When that repair process misses a repair, you end up with cancer. In other words, you probably have at least one cancerous cell in your body right this moment, and your repair systems will take care of it, probably. Story 6. Dr. Carl Sagan's pale blue dot speech. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Story 7. The first sign is when your pupils constrict extremely. They're barely there. You'll look in the mirror and blink a lot. Your eyes will feel uncomfortable because it's such an uncomfortable sight, and you'll roll them around as if trying to massage your pupils back out. That's when it happens. They're gone, swallowed up entirely by your irises. It's the last thing you see. Not only because you lose your pupils, but because you lose your consciousness. When it returns, anything could have happened. You might find yourself standing among your slaughtered family members. Or maybe you're just making a pizza, but unlikely. Because for some reason, when this happens, you act out the things that have been lingering darkly in the very back of your mind, where it's cold and there are cobwebs, and those perversions and grudges shiver and rub their starved skeletal bodies and glare at each other and gasp with difficulty what little air you let them. When you lose your consciousness, they are given free rein. You alone can know what perversions you're cursed to possess and fight with, or what angry thoughts have passed fleetingly, like sudden dark whips of sunflare. And maybe you've forgotten these things, but they've not forgotten. The cause of this is completely unknown. It has no name, but it's been recorded by several occult scholars, one of whom is my uncle, who's a shaman. He always freaked out when we were little if he thought our pupils were constricting too much. He warned us often not to stare too long into full moons, and I think he might have suspected that that had something to do with it. Although he won't go into detail, he said it's much worse. If your pupils swallow your irises, even worse, your whole eyes. Maybe in those instances, you'll have lost your mind forever, instead of simply a short, murderous while. Story 8. Scary stories are just scary stories. Even the creepy ones that stick with you are just creations of someone else's mind. Millions of people live with parasites every day. In fact, some of them are necessary for our bodies to function the way they are supposed to. Everyone experiences some sort of horrible loss in their lives, so dwelling on it is actually helpful. It prepares us for the inevitable. Death is inevitable. Scary, yes, but inevitable. All these things that terrify us, the stuff we focus on, try to prepare for, it all means nothing. The fact of the matter is, what are the real chances of a gamma ray burst or a pole reversal? About Neil, the really bad stuff just comes at you, sometimes at 8 a.m. on a random Tuesday. The moment that the little voice in your head, the one that you thought everyone had, suddenly tells you to just beat the snot of the stranger next to you on the bus. The moment that the driver of that truck looked down at their phone and started the chain of events that lands you in a wheelchair, pretty much wiping you out as your family's sole breadwinner. The second when you realize that your baby didn't just sleep through the night for the first time, they died, feet from you, all alone, and you never noticed. You can't prepare for it. You can't see the bad crap coming. All the canned fake attempts to scare yourself, no matter how well they worked at the time, are nothing compared to the true terror of the bad crap happening. Nothing compares to a perfect, sunny 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when you realize that there are things worse than your own death, worse than parasites, worse than words on a screen. Every single person, no matter how sheltered, coddled, rich, or powerful they are, will have bad crap, and you never see it coming. Story 9. I don't know if this is scary or not, but the more I think about it, the more sensible it seems to assume that our universe is a simulation. If you think about the progress of computers in the last 30 years, it seems certain that in another 30 years, we would have computers capable of simulations so large they could contain an entire universe. The applications for such a system would be extensive. Imagine observing a universe you could fast forward to any point in time. That's basically time travel. It goes without saying that the inhabitants of such a simulation would have no way to determine that they were, in fact, part of a simulation. So if there's one real universe containing many simulated universes, then it's statistically likely that our universe is, in fact, one of the simulations. Like I said, not really scary, but this does keep me awake at night. Story 10. There is a parasite that breeds in the intestines of cats. So what it does is infect rats and then alters their brain. So the rat is attracted to cats. So instead of running, the rat tries to get laid and is eaten. The fact that a parasite can change the mindset of a rat to lure it towards its certain death is terrifying to me, especially when you realize about half of the world's humans, 23% of Americans, are infected with this mind-altering parasite. It's been linked to schizophrenia, seizures, and it's mostly unknown exactly how it can affect humans. Story 11. There are things called rogue objects in space. Space is mostly empty, and most of this stuff is accumulated into semi-stable systems like solar systems and galaxies. Sometimes due to collisions or something else, objects get knocked out of their orbits and into empty space. These objects are nearly impossible to detect, and they move in a random direction and speed relative to all the other stuff in the area. If a massive enough rogue black hole passed near or through our solar system, it would drag all the planets into different orbits, or possibly into its own tail of debris, or even swallow Earth with a direct hit. The odds of this happening are indescribably minute, but it would be utterly unstoppable, and it would destroy humanity. The whole event could take as little as a week. Story 12. In situations of extreme stress or comments before death, your body releases a large dose of a chemical called DMT into your brain. This chemical is also normally introduced to your brain during sleep and is generally responsible for you experiencing dreams at night. One of the really cool things about dreaming is that it can often be very difficult to tell if you're really asleep or not. Anyway, the large dose of DMT you get from trauma or death can make you have experiences that seem like last years, and in the case of death, an eternity. The thing about these dreams is that you could be experiencing them right now and not even aware that you are. You've already done the last thing you'll ever do, and your unconscious body is moments away from the end of its last impulse. Story 13. The fact that all facts are impossible to prove objectively. No amount of data or knowledge can change the fact that we rely on an imperfect set of sensory data and then filter that data with an imperfect processing system. This system changes the data and distorts using previous information gathered with the same imperfect system. Your senses and brain lie to you all of the time. No matter what devices we make or errors you account for, there is no way to objectively say the experiences you have are real. Even if you make the assumption that your senses are reliable, which they are not, you also have to grip with the fact that you can't possibly know anything beyond the scope of your senses. Your brain is fantastic at convincing itself that things are factual. The reality of it is that our memories are fluid and change whenever we remember them. You can't actually prove that anything or anyone exists if they are not near you. Remember your first kiss? Or the first time that you had intercourse? How about that time there was a spider crawling on you? Fun fact, those three memories are now more closely linked in your mind than they were before you read this. Next time you recall your first kiss, you may also remember the spider. Every time you recall anything, you have changed that memory. Eventually, it will be nothing like what really happened. Story 14. Totally drug-resistant tuberculosis exists. It is airborne, highly contagious, highly lethal, completely incurable, and there have been at least 4 near misses of it escaping into the broader population, namely, people with confirmed cases who escaped from quarantine and, by sheer luck each time, apparently died before they came into contact with enough people to spread it. There are a lot of things that worry me. Peak nitrogen, potential loss of our genetic monocrop, staples to blight, the second rise of global fascism, the millions of dollars a year that the casino, marketing, and retail industries are putting into research into how to subvert free will, the fact that our modern global economy could not survive 3 severe simultaneous shocks without collapse, without global starvation and political turmoil that would make the terror after the French Revolution look like a minor local disturbance. Story 15. You know how Republicans are always like, the government is out to get us, and the Democrats are all like, the government wants to help us. The truth is, it isn't one large shadowy organization. It's really a bunch of disjoint organizations where nobody really knows what the others are doing. Think about that for a while, and the more you really dwell on it, the more terrifying it becomes. The president kind of knows what the NSA and CIA are doing, but not really. In fact, the NSA kind of knows what the CIA is doing, and they both are really removed from the military. The EPA is entirely disjoint from all of those things. Sure, they all have their overseers, but really they're just concerned with getting their day-to-day stuff done. The thing is, we're all flying by the seat of our pants, and nobody is really controlling the direction of it. Story 16. Capgras syndrome. A certain kind of brain damage severs the connection between your visual cortex and the emotional center of your brain, but the link to your higher cognitive areas are intact. You can see your own mother, or anyone important to you, know for a fact that she looks identical to your mother, but something will feel off and you will be convinced she is an imposter. My grandmother suffered from this as she lapsed into Alzheimer's. It was incredibly sad to hear about how her children would see her and talk with her, and she would be so nice and kind, but remind them that even though they were very nice people and very good imposters, they were still not her children. Eventually, Alzheimer's took that away over the years, and all that was left was a screaming 4-year-old mind in an 80-year-old body. That's when you realize that death isn't always the worst thing that can happen. Wow, this is depressing. I'm going back to work now. Story 17. If you're attacked by a bear, it won't try to kill you, like other predators would. It'll just start eating. Isn't there a story, video, or audio clip of a young woman getting attacked by a bear, and in the last moments of her life, she calls her mom to tell her what's happening? She hears her daughter being eaten to death, literally, while the girl is mumbling, "Don't worry, Mom, it doesn't hurt anymore." Vague memory during my many sleepless nights Redditing. I forgot where I read this. Maybe that's a good thing, because it's horrible. Story 18. When I was about 25 years old, my mother had to have major surgery to clean out the artery in her neck. Naturally, we were all very worried about her. Side note, my 11-year-old sister had a hamster. So fast forward to about a week or so after her surgery, the whole house is filled with family as mom recoups on the couch. Little sister comes up to me because she is upset that her hamster is all wet. I go to investigate. Apparently, while the whole family was in the hospital worried about mom, nobody cleaned the hamster's cage. Lil Hammy had gotten a parasite that literally ate through his entire midsection. When I looked in the cage, all the fur was rotting away from his belly chest, and the reason he was all wet was due to that hole. I could see his little hamster ribs and his gray little heart beating. Every time he took a drink from the water bottle, the water was pouring out of this rotted out hole in his body. The image of it still haunts me to this day. Sorry for how long this is. I literally just joined Reddit like 4.5 minutes ago. Story 19. My brother and I used to stay at my grandmother's house in rural Ireland, very isolated, not even a pub nearby. It was a small house. My grandmother slept upstairs, and my brother and I shared a bedroom downstairs. I slept in a bed next to the window, and he slept on the other side of the room. One night at about 2 a.m., I was woken up by someone knocking on the window. Very quick, repetitive knocks. Definitely a person, but I was too paralyzed with fear to even turn my head. The knocking stopped after about 7 or 8 minutes. It happened again about 3 months later, but this time my brother wasn't there. Again, I was so frightened I didn't move or look out the window. Flash forward 10 years, I'm at my grandmother's funeral, and I get talking to the neighbors, most of which I've never met before. Bizarrely, I remember the knocking and mention it to them in a joking kind of way, not thinking much of it. Turns out one of the neighbor's 19-year-old sons suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and used to go wandering at night. The same year that I heard all the knocking, he burned down a large barn and a field of corn before hanging himself from a tree. Story 20. The phrase saved by the bell comes from burying people and not knowing whether they were dead or not. For instance, if someone was comatose, they may have been buried and later wake up. Some caskets were dug up and found to have claw marks on them. So, as a solution to this problem, was to tie a string to someone's finger and put a bell above the grave, which was attached to the finger. Whoever was on the graveyard shift would walk around and listen for bells, and if they heard one ringing, they would know to dig up the person. Thus the phrase, saved by the bell. It has nothing to do with school. Edit. So, apparently I'm wrong. I feel terrible for lying to the whole internet. Please forgive me. I did not know I was wrong. I heard this on NPR and assumed it to be true, but as other users have been kind enough to point out, it is actually false. Though this is a common myth of where the term comes from, it appears to actually come from the not-so-scary or creepy sport of boxing. Well, it's a little creepy. Yeah, I guess that's what I get for trusting the liberal media and their gotcha journalism. Story 21. Remnants of the Cold War number stations were created by government agencies to send coded messages on other information around the world to agents. Many number stations continue running to this day and can be found on shortwave radio. Some of them are creepy children's songs from the 40 AES. Other ones are just a person reading off numbers all day. According to urban legend, a country, I believe it was Russia, had a bunch of weapon systems configured to listen to a number station. If the number station vanished for a long enough period of time, then the weapons would be launched. Russia openly admitted that they don't even know where every single Cold War launch site is hiding. And though they have tried their best to shut down all of them, it is believed a few may still be in operation. For this reason, the number station continues to be broadcast to this day to keep any of the unfound, unknown bunker sites from launching. It is believed by some that if this particular number station ever went offline for more than a few days, it would mean nuclear Armageddon, and they are all aimed at various locations in the US. Story 22. The most unsettling fact that I know is not some conspiracy, but science. After the Big Bang, all matter and energy in the universe started expanding from one point. Well, it was evidently discovered that the universe has reached escape velocity from itself. That is, that the gravitational pull of all matter in the universe cannot pull hard enough to bring it all back together. What does this mean? It means that all things will play out, energy-wise. Eventually, all the matter in the universe will use up all the potential energy and just drift apart forever. Everything will die, and this existence only happens once. Story 23. I live in a perfect little town in Midwest America, and things aren't as perfect as they seem. I took a criminal justice class at a tech school during high school, and then I did some rides along with officers and became decent friends with them. I began riding with them more and more, and they would show me pictures of crime scenes. The two I most remember are when a group of people broke into a neighbor's house and beat him to death, and sat him in a chair in the corner of the room and took pictures with him, and then continued to party and do drugs the rest of the night. The body was found weeks later. The second is when a guy was hit by a car in a rural area, then the car drove off. Worse yet is that two other cars hit the body afterwards and continued on their way. Story 24. Your hands never really touch anything. The molecules that make up your skin have some kind of barrier that keeps your hand and doesn't fuse with anything like a table or a book. In essence, there's always some kind of skinny force field that separates your body from other people or foreign objects. Technically, you have never touched anything in your life. Hash 2. Everything you see happened in the past. I believe there's two ways that makes this possible. One is the light bouncing from the object to reach your eye. The other is the time it takes your brain to process what your eye sees and interprets as an image you can understand. Sure, these processes happen in a split second, but it's still something that can be measured. You're always living in the past. Hash 3. How can you be sure your life is real? Basically, all of your senses and all of your actions are just chemicals firing off in your brain. Everything you see, say, and hear begins in your brain's activity. If we had the technology, we could just jack your brain to a computer that simulates brain activity, and your consciousness would see everything as normal. How do you know that your brain isn't hooked up to a computer while reading this? Scary, because I made a lot of friends depressed after telling them this.